Okay, welcome to the final go-to session of the month. This is the second session for week 4, so we're at the end here. This presentation is just going to be a pretty quick overview of your final assignment and also just some wrap-up comments for the course. We intentionally keep things kind of light. It's the final session. People are sort of winding down. They're not really up for a 1 hour or an hour and a half session at the very end of the month. By the way, congratulations for the people who are still in the course. You've made it through, I hope. Of course, there are still some final things to grade, but you've made it this far, which I hope is a good sign. And so this is really sort of a wrap up and a goodbye and a reminder of what you still need to do before the course ends this Sunday. So here's a quick overview of what I'll go over. Yeah, Brandon says in the chat. Actually, I'm doing a full screen recording, so people should be able to see his chat comment. Yeah, we did lose a good deal of classmates. I can't reveal too much about why that happens. Some people just find out real quickly within the first week that Full Sail isn't right for them, and they sort of reconsider their choice. Others just, for whatever reason, time commitments, family commitments, whatever. Maybe right now isn't the time to attend Full Sail. But no, we still have about 15 people left, which is a pretty good bunch. Anyway, here's what we'll go over. I want to introduce this concept of the digital citizenship compass because it's something you'll need to do for the final assignment. Then I do want to talk about the bringing it all together assignment, which is kind of the last big thing you need to work on that's due this Sunday. And finally, this was supposed to be something that the entire group would reflect on, but we only have Brandon here. So Brandon can already think in advance what were some of the favorite things he learned this month in terms of either tools, ideas, or concepts, or specific activities that we participated in. And then I'll just open up for any questions that Brandon might have. Although we might have another person show up in just a moment. Oh, look, we do have someone else. Jason's here. We have a second person. Okay, so Jason, I'm just going over what we're going to discuss in this session. I'm actually going to reverse things. Instead of talking about the digital citizenship compass first, I'm going to talk about the assignment that's due Sunday first, because that might help better explain what the digital citizenship compass is. So if we look at the assignment sheet for the final thing, hopefully you've already taken a peek at it, but it's called the Bringing It All Together assignment. And this assignment is kind of interesting in that up till now you've pretty much been completing assignments that ask you to do lots of different things, use lots of different tools, show off your ability to bookmark things in Diigo and take screenshots and find images and do this and do that. The final assignment is actually sort of old school in that you'll really probably only need a Microsoft Word document to complete this. As a matter of fact, the instructions recommend that you use just a kind of standard document program to complete this. Basically, you'll be answering a series of questions that are split into 3 different sections. You can read through the objectives on your own. Here are the 3 parts. So, part 1 focuses on the 9 themes of digital citizenship. Part 2 is the digital citizenship compass, which we'll take a closer look at in just a moment. And part 3 asks questions related to, as a digital citizen, what would you do? So, for example, let's look at part 1. Okay, part 1 is kind of a matching activity. You have all these terms, right? These are the 9 items of digital citizenship. If you need a reminder of them, you just need to go back to the activity and find that link that took you to the article. Or you can just Google 9 elements of digital citizenship, and the first thing that will pop up is the article that was linked to in that activity. So if you need a reminder or an overview over what these terms meant, you probably remember in general what the terms meant, but perhaps you need to go back and remind yourself because it's kind of this first section is sort of a quiz with short answers. So, for instance, you're given 9 situations down here. Like, I'll give you one of them, okay? Because this one's pretty standard. So, number 4 asks you purchasing name brand products on sites such as eBay.com. Like, which one of these elements of digital citizenship do you think matches best with this description? Purchasing name brand products. You can go ahead and answer in the chat. Purchasing name brand products on eBay. Is that an issue that's related to health and wellness? Yeah, Jason jumped right in. Yeah, digital commerce. I'll give you that one because that one's so easy that you don't even need probably a reminder of which element it is. But some of them you might need to go back. I mean, this is completely open book. Okay, so if you need to go back to the 9 elements reading, you can do so. Um, but you're not just kind of saying commerce and leaving it at that. You're also, oh, where's my assignment sheet? You also have to give a response. So, for example, it says for your submission, list a statement followed by your choice and explanation. So that means two things. You're going to choose which one it is. You're also going to explain your choice. Now, some of these probably don't need lengthy explanations. Like number 4 probably doesn't need too much explanation. You could probably say something like, I don't know, eBay is one of the most for I don't know how X number of years eBay has been one of the top websites for the buying and selling of goods, and thus is a major player in the world of digital commerce. You're right. Something simple like that pretty much explains it. Other things you'll have to explain your answer with a bit more care. And like I said, Microsoft Word, or if you don't have Microsoft Word or Office installed on your computer, you just find the online versions of this. Okay, so you have Google Docs, which has a word processing program, which is pretty much the same as Word. Microsoft now has what's called OneDrive, which is their online version of their software. That's a really cool thing too about digital tools is that in the past you had to pay a gazillion dollars to have a copy of Office installed on your computer, and now these companies just provide them online basically for free. But you'll probably use a word processing tool. And when you set it up however you wish. Just make sure that let me see if I can make this bigger. Just make sure that your name and student number are on there like they should be for all assignments. You can title the assignment overall, and have a section for part 1 where you'll go through the 9 prompts one at a time. So here's number 1: working with others using websites, tools such as Google Docs Suite and/or Diigo. I didn't provide an answer here because I'm not just going to give away the answers, but here's where you would choose the element of digital citizenship that best matches this description, and then also include your explanation. Okay, so that's part 1. Actually, let me get rid of this, so I'm not going to need this anymore. So there's part 1. Now, part 2 gets into the digital compass, and we'll actually look at one of these scenarios a bit closely in just a second. But if you look at the moral compass, you could tell it's similar to a regular compass, right? Except instead of north, south, east, and west, we have like right, wrong, maybe, maybe not, or doesn't bother me. So we see like the four standard ranges of feelings: absolute right and wrong, and then on the one side, kind of hedging, like yeah, maybe, maybe not, and the other side, kind of apathy, like yeah, it doesn't. I could care less, doesn't bother me. And then we have positions that are sort of in between. So for part 2, what you'll do is, again, in your Microsoft Word document, you'll copy and paste these different scenarios and provide an answer. And for each of these scenarios, you're going to explain how you feel about the statement using the digital compass. Okay, so let's look at an example of this. Here in this PowerPoint slide, I've reproduced the compass on the right. And here's a scenario. And by the way, this is a scenario from your actual assignment, okay? So we're not going to maybe answer this as... Oops. We may not answer it as completely or thoroughly as you will when it comes to the assignment, but at least we can work through it to begin with. Here's a scenario. You work for a club. The owner approaches you about your knowledge of Photoshop and wants you to edit some pictures of the club that are on the club's website. He wants you to add in equipment that the club does not have, as well as adding in famous artists who have never played there, and people to the crowd shots to make the club look more crowded. So first question, you can answer either by raising your hand and speaking out loud or by typing in the chat box, is where are you on the digital compass here? Is this right? Is it wrong? Could it be right if maybe a few changes were made? Is it worth a shot if you don't get in trouble for it? Like, where do you find yourself falling? Brandon says, not comfortable with this. Okay, so leaning toward wrong, right? And Jason says, maybe, maybe not. If you guys can explain that a little bit more, like, why not absolutely wrong? Why is Brandon just a little bit not so comfortable with this? Or why is Jason, what did he answer? He's kind of somewhat in between, right? Maybe, maybe not. So, any justifications for why that might be so? Okay, Brandon says there's misleading information. Right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. There are three things here, right? Adding equipment that the club does not own in the photo, famous artists who have not played there, and adding people to the crowd shots to make it look more crowded. Uh, yeah, I would say out of those three, like the second one is probably the biggest stumbling block for me because if you put a picture there of Danger Mouse playing to a packed house and he's never been to your club, that's not only is that misleading, but you could probably get into legal trouble for doing that, right? Because people kind of own their likenesses and you can't just use their likenesses. So that's like a big problem right there. But the other two, Jason says, I feel like maybe I would have to do it to keep my job. Okay, yeah, that's an important thing, right? In some ways, the ethics of this are more on the shoulders of that club owner than you. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't think through things as well. And if it's severe enough and you can take the hit to your salary, maybe it is something that you would stand up for and even risk losing your job or leaving your job if you didn't believe in it. On the other hand, if you're in a situation, given the economy now, where you'll basically do whatever your boss says, even if deep down inside you know it's not completely ethical. Yeah, there's things like having to hold on to your job. But how about the other stuff? Okay, putting in famous artists who've never played there, that's pretty bad. But are there any times where it might be okay to add people to the crowd shots to make it look more crowded? Can we ever make a justification for that? Like, is that always terrible, or could there be situations in which that okay, maybe it walks the line, but it could be reasonable? Or about the first one as well, like adding in equipment that doesn't belong there. Brandon said if the club needs more people, okay. Jay says maybe if it's like a parody or something. I'm not sure if I follow that. Oh, something funny. Yeah, but in order to understand that joke, like the general person who has no knowledge about the club perhaps would have to understand that it's a joke. Um, yeah, Brandon said something about if the club needs more people, right? I mean, you don't want to. I guess what I'm saying is we need more details. Like if the club needs more people, and for instance, they take you know, there are nights where the club is certainly busy, but they didn't have a photographer on hand that night to take that photo. Maybe it has nights where it's a little bit dead, but it does have nights that it's truly busy. So you're not going to just upload the photo of it on a dead night because A, that's going to turn people away. And B, it's not completely dishonest because if you do have certain nights where the club is hopping, you certainly want to present that kind of image. Um, More misleading would be is if the club is just on death's door and you try to sell it as being a packed place every night. So I do think that's one of those situations where if we have a few more details, we can understand the situation. Um, Same thing with the first one, like adding equipment that the club doesn't own. Okay, that's probably misleading, but I would need to know like what kind of equipment, or maybe the club does have equipment that's close to what's being pictured. But I guess what I'm saying is it's kind of like when you watch advertisements on television, and that burger looks incredible. It looks huge and juicy and fresh, and it looks like it's about 10 feet tall. And then you actually buy the thing through the drive-through one day, and it's this smashed, sad-looking thing, right? It's wrapped up in paper, and it's just this dead-looking thing with half-dead lettuce hanging off the burger, and the corners of the cheese are like all hardened and crusty. Like we do understand to a certain degree that advertisement is partly about making things look better, sort of like the airbrushing equivalent of what happens with celebrities and models. And that's always a difficult ethical line. On the one hand, we do understand that you want to put your product in the best possible light. On the other hand, if you cross a certain line where it gets into flat out lying, then that's more problematic. So I would say that I don't know where would I fall on this thing. Uh, Gosh, I might be. I might be with Jason here with the maybe, maybe not. I would be tempted to say could be right with a few changes, like the changes I've kind of been suggesting. I probably lean more time towards maybe, maybe not, just because of that detail about picturing famous artists who have never played there. That's pretty. That's pretty awful. The other two I can make justifications for, maybe, maybe especially if there are changes. But here's the thing: there are no absolute right or wrong answers for this. This doesn't mean that everything's. I mean, you still have to provide a pretty good justification. And by the way, if I can go back to the assignment sheet real quickly, you do get these little reminders for each scenario. So, like we just looked at, where's the one we just looked at? Oh, I'm in the wrong section. Oh yeah, here it is. Number 6 is the one we just went over. You work for a club, the owner approaches you, blah blah blah. After each prompt, there's like a week 1, week 3, week 2, week 3. That's just reminding you that the kind of major principles that the prompt is asking deal with concepts that we went over that week. So week 1 has to do with digital immigrants versus digital natives and identifying what kind of digital citizen you are. Week 2 was largely about looking into information online to determine whether it's trustworthy or not. Um, Week number 3 was more about digital citizenship in general, and of course, this week has been more about like copyright and things like that. So you get these kind of hints after each scenario to kind of remind you of what you were supposed to be dealing with, because it's not enough just to give your personal opinion on the scenario. I mean, yes, that's the major thing you're doing. For instance, include the scenario and your explanation, but also tying it to the course materials and the compass direction. So it's not enough to say like, oh, I'm going to choose wrong on the moral compass, and here's my long explanation of why. I mean, the explanation is fine, but it should be touching on concepts that we've talked about in class, either the 9 elements of digital citizenship or whatever else. Even if it doesn't have a specific, or if you find that it applies to a different week. For example, if you think that number 6, which we just went over, has a connection to week 2 actually, because it has to deal with judging information that you find online to decide if it's credible or not, and you want to play on that idea, that's fine. But try to be connecting this stuff to the information that we've learned in the course, so that you're not just speaking entirely from your own opinion. Yeah, I do want to hear your own opinion. I think that's important. It's a big part of it. But so is connecting these ideas to class concepts that we've talked about. And again, you have the opportunity to go into whatever activity we've done throughout the month and revisit these ideas, or you can remind yourself of the general stuff that we've sort of covered. And the same thing applies for part 3, where again you'll look at specific scenarios, questions, and also give an explanation or an answer. We're not going to do one of these on the fly, but here's number 4. You see a vintage car for sale on eBay for an awesome price. You really want it, but the price seems too good to be true. The eBay ad has several photos, a list of the car's features, and the location of the sellers. The seller, what steps would you take to ensure the authenticity of the offer? Sure, absolutely. You're going to describe those steps, right? And we're looking for your detailed and intelligent response, but at the same time, try to connect it to the concepts that we've learned in class. Okay, and this one gives you a big hint. Week 2, right? So the one about the vintage car on sale for eBay is asking how could you find out information that tells you whether something is credible or not. Okay, because credibility, yeah. In this course, we looked at articles online to determine credibility, but there are lots of things that ask us to do those same things, and we use digital tools to find out the answers to these things. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure that you go over these pretty carefully. There's a lot to cover here, right? There's 6 for part 3, 6 scenarios for part 3, 7 scenarios for part 2. There are a whole bunch of terms that you need to match up with the correct description and then give an explanation. So the good news is you're not having to go through Deagle lists and snapshots and screenshots and going into the databases and finding images and putting together a Prezi. No, you don't have to do anything for that. It's pretty much, in some ways, the most straightforward assignment of the month. But in some ways, it might take even more effort than the others, because there's quite a bit of thinking and writing to do to really go through each of these parts with care. And actually, that reminds me, because sometimes I forget to do this in these sessions. Um, but to always look at the rubric. Okay, so I want to bring that up real quickly. Oh, I should have had this open in advance. Okay, where are you, rubric? Right, so here again is a description of what you need to do if you want to do really, really well in the assignment. Right, so for part one, there is a quiz aspect to it, so you should be matching all 9 themes correctly to the descriptions, and that you're giving explanations that fit. If you can match most of them, you'll get still a lot of credit. Did you provide explanations for part 2 involving the digital citizenship compass? Again, to get an A. Oops. Let me make that a little bit bigger. To get an A, yeah, statements are justified in detail. They're clearly reasoned, and the student incorporates class concepts. Okay, so be sure to look at the rubric, because it kind of tells you what you need to do really well, to do kind of well, to do not so hot, and just to flat out fail the assignment. That typically happens when just a student doesn't do it at all. Okay, reflection time. There's only 2 of you. So think back to what we've done and try to think of what was your favorite tool, idea, or concept, or activity for the month. And try to come up with one for each. So for tool, I mean that in the broadest sense possible. Like, if you like Diigo, sure, mention that. But not everybody loves Diigo. Some people find it more of a pain than a help, although I think it's useful. But tools that you had to work with, things that maybe you had to try out that you had never tried out before to create some of your projects, a favorite idea or concept that we talked about during the month. Okay, we've talked about a lot of stuff. And then maybe a favorite activity. So, who's got some things that they want to throw out there? Okay, Jason says Diigo. Are you just saying Diigo, or you really think that it was useful? Because that drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, Diigo is useful," but they don't. Oh, okay, good. You really do think it was useful. How about other things? Ideas, concepts, activities? Remember all the activities we did? Week 1, you created your digital vision, creating a word collage, or what did we do week 2? Oh, the misinformation debate, and we're looking into credible sources. Okay, Brandon says the vision projects were fun. Week 3, I could just go back to the FSO page, but I want to show off that I can remember this stuff off the top of my head. Week 3 was more about digital citizenship and looking into scenarios, both the Paul Revere scenario and the more in-depth project where you had to look at Hurricane Sandy. So any favorite activities? Brandon mentioned the vision projects. Was there anything else that was worthwhile or fun? Yeah, that's actually a good point, Jason. If I had to answer this question, I'm the instructor, not a student. But yeah, I like the TED videos. I think they're all pretty terrific. I like the fact that most of them are short. I don't think there's a single one that's over, I don't know, 16 minutes or so. They're usually in that sort of 10 to 15 minute range, and all of them are really pretty fascinating. Stuff like how your position can be narrowed down to like pretty much an exact spot, and it's going to even become more pronounced. The YouTube one that we looked at this week, I think that's fascinating. All right, what was it, like 100 years worth of videos are uploaded every day to YouTube, and YouTube tries to sort through it all to spot issues of, copyright violation. So yeah, I like the TED videos. I don't know. I'm kind of like a practical guy. So if I were a student, I would just I like all the stuff like taking screenshots, finding images and dragging them into like a PowerPoint presentation or a Prezi. I like that kind of stuff. I don't know why. I mean, I think some students don't like that kind of stuff at all, but I like researching stuff and finding stuff and dragging stuff into projects. So those sorts of really kind of like hands-on, practical stuff I like a lot. Uh, Anything else we want to add before we kind of wrap things up? I told you today is going to be kind of a lighter session. But just, the reflection here is designed to make us try to remember what we've done this month because we have covered so much. And 4 weeks always moves fast, but for some reason in DGL it seems to really move fast just because there are so many tools and so many concepts and so many things thrown at you that it's difficult to remember them all. And I don't expect you to remember every single one uh, after this course is over, but I hope you remember some of them. I hope you remember some of the key concepts, at least in terms of like, yeah, digital citizenship in general, but even more specific things like copyright. I think that's always a fascinating conversation that we have when we look at copyright issues and how they're both being challenged and how we have to think more broadly. But we still have to respect copyright, but we still have to understand that we're entering kind of a new information age where people need to share things. So I think that's always kind of fascinating. So try to keep these things in mind, okay, as you move forward, because most of you are in industries where these concepts are going to become pretty important, and plus you're going to keep encountering them throughout your time at Full Sail. So if you get me during month 4 for English composition, we'll be revisiting some of this material in different form. Um, but hopefully that's my goal, that you kind of take away something from the course. Any final questions about anything? So what you need to do for this Sunday's assignment, what you need to do in terms of anything else, questions or comments about the big trades that happened before Major League Baseball's trade deadline today at 4 p.m., anything. Um, or are we good? Okay. Usually this is a more robust session because we have more than 2 people in the room. But, guys, it's been a pleasure. So we'll keep in touch through other means. But if you don't have any questions, you're good to go. You're free to leave. Thanks for showing up.